Is I don't know. You coming? Okay, all right. All right, we might get started. Thanks very much for coming. I'd like to welcome our next witnesses, Ms. Barone. Is that how you pronounce your name? Sorry,
That's
thank you very much. Ms. Moore, thank you very much for coming. And Ms. Jennifer Concato, is that right? Thanks very much. I might ask each witness, maybe starting with you, Ms. Barone, to please state your full name, title and position and swear either an oath or an affirmation.
Monica Barone, CEO, City of Sydney. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Lord Mayor.
Clover Moore, I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. And Ms. Concato.
Jennifer Concato, the Executive Director of City Planning and Design at the City of Parramatta Council. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Thank
you. Would any of you care to make... Oh, I beg your pardon, I didn't see Mr. Newman there.
That's okay.
Tunnel vision. Mr. Newman, please.
Brett Newman, CEO, City of Parramatta. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Would anyone care to make an opening statement, maybe starting with you, Lord Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Could you please limit it to a minute or two?
Members, thank you for the invitation to appear before you. The City of Sydney applauds the government's decision to retain the Powerhouse Museum at Ultimo and its intention to create a new sister museum in Parramatta, which will also hopefully respect that city's heritage and history. We have always supported meeting Western Sydney's cultural needs, but not by pitting region against region. Western Sydney should have its own iconic cultural facilities, but not by destroying a distinctive and valued inner-city cultural institution. On the 6th of April, Council reaffirmed its strong opposition to plans to relocate the Powerhouse Museum. We also resolved to strongly advocate for continued cultural and creative uses of the Ultimo site if the relocation proceeded. I am pleased that the government has now recognised that retaining the museum is the best cultural use. The Powerhouse Museum has made an invaluable contribution to our cultural and intellectual life since its beginnings as the Technological, Industrial and Sanitary Museum of New South Wales in 1979. Its value is recognised in its former name, the Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences. The museum's significance to the Sydney's cultural, social, scientific, industrial and economic history and heritage has been recognised. It makes an equally vital contribution to the Ultimo Pyrmont Chippendale Creative and Innovation Precinct. Keeping the Powerhouse Museum is an opportunity to rethink and renew it, keeping in mind the significance of its home in a former powerhouse connected with early Sydney tramways. There is also now the opportunity to strengthen its contribution and for it to be more fully integrated into the planning of this really important precinct. This was the key element of a 2020 vision of the Powerhouse released by the Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences trustees in May 2014. I refer to this vision in my Lord Mayoral Minute of March 2015, noting, and I quote, "The Darling Harbour revitalisation will bring thousands of visitors and the goods line pedestrian link will link existing arts, education and cultural institutions. The Powerhouse will integrate with Darling Harbour through its new entrance onto the goods line. The area around the Powerhouse is a major centre for education, media and creative and digital economies. Around 18,000 people are employed in digital and creative industries in the Haymarket, Pyrmont and Ultimo area, providing approximately 30% of digital and creative jobs in our city. The Powerhouse Museum provides a significant strategic opportunity to help secure new economic, tourism, cultural and educational opportunities as a result of the precinct's current transformation," unquote. We have no fixed or final ideas on what form this renewal should take, but it should be based on a thorough understanding of how the museum could best contribute to the precinct, not only as a significant destination, but culturally, socially and economically. Maximising this strategic opportunity is critical, and not least because the Powerhouse site is included within the New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry and Environment's review of planning controls for the Pyrmont Peninsula. The City of Sydney is ready to work and very willing to work collaboratively with the New South Wales Government to maximise the strategic opportunity through the renewal of the museum as part of the wider precinct. and linking it with, and that would enable a better understanding of the pedestrian connections between Pyrmont and the city, and a proper destination for the goods line, which is a wonderful government initiative which is yet to reach its full potential. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps just a couple of brief comments, if you don't mind. Firstly, the City of Parramatta has for a long time been advocating for investment in arts and culture in the City of Parramatta, and including the relocation of the Powerhouse Museum. There's a number of reasons for this. Most importantly, for many years, Western Sydney has suffered from an underinvestment in arts and culture. It represents approximately 10% of the total population of Australia, but unfortunately only represents 1% of total federal funding in arts and culture, and approximately 5 to 6% of investment in arts and culture for the state budget. Secondly, the population in Western Sydney, and particularly in the Parramatta local government area, is expected to double over the next 15 to 20 years, from approximately 270,000 now to over 460,000 in 15 years' time. And thirdly, the loss of jobs and economic income and benefits that derive from having strong cultural institutions in our area is a significant loss to the local community and the economy. On the 2nd of July this year, the Chamber, the Council for the City of Parramatta, endorsed three things in relation to the relocation of the Powerhouse Museum. Firstly, it re-endorsed and affirmed its support for the relocation of the museum to Parramatta. Secondly, it endorsed our submission in response to the EIS on the Powerhouse Museum relocation and included a number of comments, and that submission itself again endorses the relocation, but also provides feedback and opportunity for improvement on the design on a couple of key aspects, which hopefully we'll get into later today. And thirdly, the Council re-endorsed its support for retention of both Willow Grove and St George's Terraces. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Questions?
Yep. Mr. Newman, this morning we heard evidence from the Arts Minister about the Riverside Theatre proposal, and it was 140 or 100 million. What is the status of has the government in fact transferred the money to Parramatta Council?
Thank you. The City of Parramatta sold the current site on which the Powerhouse Museum is proposed to be relocated to the New South Wales government about 1.5 years ago, from memory. And the purchase price was approximately $140 million. But all of those proceeds have now been received by the City of Parramatta.
Okay, so why are we hearing concerns expressed about delays involving the Riverside Theatre redevelopment?
I would need to understand what those concerns are.
Well, you have local councillors urging us to ask you, not ask you, but ask the minister questions about what's happening with Riverside. And the minister said this morning that the money had been transferred to Parramatta Council. So where...
It's the same evidence you're getting now.
Yeah, so I'm asking a question to find out, okay, so the ball is now in Parramatta City Council's court. So...
Really?
I want...
Are you waiting on any additional funding from the state government in order to realise the vision laid out in relation to the Riverside Theatre, or was the entire state government funding contribution, the $140 million from the sale of the site, or was there additional funding that from the state government that the council was waiting on?
So the current status of the proposal, which is in relation to the redevelopment of the Riverside Theatre, which is not part of the Powerhouse redevelopment, just to be clear for other members. The state government and the City of Parramatta continue to work on a business case, which is a business case which, if and when it is finalised, would support two things: potentially enable the state government to consider further an investment in the redevelopment of Riverside. And that business case is also very useful. In fact, it's an essential document to support any future consideration of the City of Parramatta to redevelop the Riverside theatres.
So when you say if and when it is finalised, it will be finalised because it is an essential document, the business case. So when is that likely to be finalised?
Well, from our perspective, I can't speak for the state government, obviously, but from our perspective, we are hoping to finalise that business case at the end of this year and look to finalise the assessment on. In any redevelopment, you always have different options that you might consider on what you might propose to develop on that site. So that business case will include a number of options. We would hope to finalise that, I would hope, by the end of this year, and then hope that would then inform and enable us to put a proposal to council as to what it would like to do in relation to that redevelopment, and then also enable the state government to consider whether or not it would wish to provide contribution to that development.
And again, just in relation to the Parramatta Council's preferred options for that, it is the case, isn't it, that the Parramatta Council would like to see the redevelopment of that area and the contents of the business case describe a vision that would require additional state government funding to be realised, wouldn't it? That is the direction that Parramatta City Council would like that to go.
Well, the City of Parramatta has yet to make a decision on any option for the Riverside, so let's just be clear on that. But of course, the City of Parramatta would welcome any additional investment from the state government in the redevelopment of that theatre for the same reasons I said right at the commencement. We believe there's a significant underinvestment in culture and infrastructure in Parramatta. A redevelopment of the Riverside would obviously go some way to support additional cultural investment, and particularly in theatre and the arts. We're planning to proceed to complete that business case, provide a number of options to enable the council to then make a decision, and as part of that, if the state government wishes to make an additional contribution, that would be highly welcome.
You would wish that they would do that?
Well, of course, it would be fantastic.
Mr. Newman, there were multiple reports at the time the sale was negotiated that Parramatta Council had got a very good price for the land. In fact, one report says that a source close to the discussions told your local paper that the council had been trying to extort money from the state for the purchase price. Do you recall those discussions at the time and those concerns about the price?
Mr. Shibbridge, I was not at the City of Parramatta at the time of those negotiations, so I actually don't have an opinion on the value that the City of Parramatta obtained and whether or not that was good value for the city.
You had no role at all in any of those negotiations?
Not on behalf of the City of Parramatta, no.
Any role at all in the negotiations on the other side?
Some limited role.
Because you had part of your role was negotiating for the state government at the time, wasn't it?
So at the time of that sale, my recollection is, so just again for all committee members, at that time I was the Deputy Secretary of the Property and Advisory Group, which is a division of the Department of Finance and a department within the New South Wales Government. One of those roles was also the CEO of the Property New South Wales. Property New South Wales had some role in relation to that. My recollection, it's over 2 years ago from memory, my recollection is that Property New South Wales provided some preliminary advice to Create New South Wales, who I think from memory was the lead agency at the time. However, we did not act on behalf of, Property New South Wales did not act directly on behalf of Create New South Wales in relation to the negotiation of that price with the City of Parramatta. But what I would like to do is take that on notice and confirm that back to the committee.
Well, you see, Mr. Newman, you've kind of gone from, and I accept you, I appreciate you taking those timings and details on notice, but you see, you've gone from one side of this deal to the other, haven't you? You've gone from acting, having a role for the state government in setting and negotiating the price, which reports continue to say was a very high price for the property. And now you're on the other side, acting for the council, who's in receipt of the money. do you think there might be a potential of a conflict of interest? You having flipped from one side to the other, and or whether or not you have any, commercial in confidence information in your prior role?
Point of order.
What's the point of order?
The point of order is, I have no idea, and frankly, apart from having a shot at the witness, I have really difficulty in understanding how this has anything to do with the terms of this inquiry. And I think really in terms of this witness, it's grossly unfair what's now being done.
Well, I'll briefly say the matter's able to be put. He's gone from one side of the record to the other,
that you try and pass,
and it's well within terms of reference.
I think it is within the terms of reference, and the witness can decide to answer or not.
Thank you, Chair. The first thing is, as I said, my recollection is that Property New South Wales did not act on behalf of Create New South Wales, who my recollection is was negotiating the sale of
I'm not going to
site.
press you. I know you've taken that on notice, and you'll provide more detail.
No,
that
that goes to answer your question about the conflict. So, as I said, my recollection is Property New South Wales did not act on behalf of Create New South Wales in relation to the negotiation of the price with the City of Parramatta. And if my recollection is correct, then there would be no conflict. Secondly, my role was provide some overall strategic advice. It was not in relation to the terms of that transaction from memory. Secondly, that transaction was over 2 years ago. That transaction in terms of the transfer of the land and the payment of the proceeds is complete. My role, I've been the CEO of the City of Parramatta for about 9 months. So in terms of timing, there is no conflict because that transaction, being the negotiation of the price, is not still ongoing. If it were, then I can see there may be an argument for it, but it's not. It's complete.
The suggestion here, and I accept your answer, and you'll give some further details about your role on notice. But I think many people would suggest that Parramatta Council got paid well above market price for the property because they kind of had the state government over a barrel. Is that your recollection? That they really had the whip hand in the negotiations and they got paid, above market price because this was something this government wanted?
To be completely honest with you, and I'm not avoiding the question, I have no recollection. But if that were correct, then clearly there'd be no conflict.
Well, in your current role, no.
Yeah, exactly.
I accept that. But I'm asking you about this. The suggestion is that Parramatta got paid well over market price.
As I say, I can't comment because I don't know. I do recall that I do not think it was a compulsory acquisition under the Just Terms legislation. So the process which normally provides for two valuations and both the parties being comfortable with the price, I don't think occurred in this case. I think it was a genuine negotiation between the parties. So if you have an open, free negotiation between the parties, it's up to the parties to agree the price or not. Other than that, I genuinely do not recall whether that was good value or not for either party.
Yeah, well, my final question to you is, given there are those concerns that there may well have been a payment well above market price, what do you see the likelihood of getting additional state funding for the Riverside development in addition to the $140 million? Because many people are saying you've already had a pretty big drink here with $140 million on the Riverside.
Well, a couple of comments. Firstly, that transaction was in relation to the acquisition on the part of the state government and the sale on the part of the City of Parramatta of a piece of land, hopefully at market value. As I said, I don't recall. That is a very separate matter in my mind from any consideration of the state government or any other party for that matter, of whether or not it wishes to contribute and invest in cultural institutions in Western Sydney. I would genuinely hope that the New South Wales government would take any good investment and any good business case for further and additional investment, particularly in theatre arts in Western Sydney, on its merit and on its face, and separate that from any transaction in relation to an asset at market value. But of course, that's a matter for the state government.
Mr. Newman, when the transaction involved the sale of the site, was there knowledge by Parramatta Council that there would be impact on Willow Grove and St. George's Terrace when the transaction occurred?
I apologise again. It's very difficult for me to say because I was not at Parramatta Council at that time. However, I will refer to Ms Concato. She may be able to answer it. But I would just remind committee members before I hand over to Ms Concato that Willow Grove and St George's Terraces were part of the site at the time of the sale.
So when the sale occurred, the Parramatta Council was aware that it was part of the arrangements?
Yeah. Ms Concato.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Newman. Yes, that's correct. During the negotiations, I was not directly involved through that process on behalf of the City of Parramatta Council. But I do understand that, yes, there was a clear understanding that St George's Terraces and Willow Grove were involved, given that they are located on the subject site.
By were involved, are you saying were likely to be demolished in order to allow for the development to happen?
No, I did not say that. No, that's not what I meant by the word involved. But other than that, they're located on the current site, and that there was a clear understanding that the sale included the sale of those properties.
But the government wasn't buying them because they liked the heritage sites and wanted to maintain them and give them a fresh paint job. They were buying them to get a chunk of land to build the museum on. Was there no risk analysis done in council about the loss of these two beautiful, crucial heritage properties?
Thank you for the question. As I stated, I wasn't directly involved in those early negotiations. However, what I do understand was that there was some preliminary analysis and the commencement of a position of council that those items should be retained.
Well, now I understand that in your opening remarks you talked about the need. Mr. Newman talked about the need to preserve Willow Grove and St. George's Terrace. So, what's made them very important to preserve now?
So the City of Parramatta's position on Willow Grove and St George's Terraces is that they would have continued to advocate and they resolved to support the retention of those sites because of their heritage, including, and again, Ms Concato will be able to give more details on their heritage, but it's the age of the buildings. I think they're locally listed, and their local heritage and cultural significance. Okay. Ms Concato may be able to add to that.
Okay.
Yep. Certainly, thank you. Both items are locally heritage listed within the Parramatta Local Environmental Plan. They have been for some time. The question related to now, why is there interest in retaining them now? There's always been interest in retaining them. That is why they're heritage listed. So the council has been fairly consistent in relation to that matter.
So when the site was originally sold, heritage concerns were expressed about it at the time.
My understanding is that, yes, I believe so.
Oh, okay.
Well, can you tell us whatever protections council negotiated or whatever considerations council had at the time of the sale in order to protect the heritage? Because council would have been aware that a state significant development can override any local heritage protections or the like, and this was always going to be state significant development. Can you tell us what if any, considerations and protections council had negotiated at the time?
My knowledge of that is quite limited, like I said, because I was not involved in those negotiations. Those negotiations took place by the previous CEO and Chief Financial Officer.
I'm happy for you to take that on notice and review the records, Ms Concato.
I'm happy to do that, thank you.
Are you able to provide any additional information, even along the lines of whether council requested or sought to secure additional protection for those heritage sites, and that this was rebuffed by the government as part of the negotiation process? Do you have any knowledge of whether the request was made by council and refused by government, or whether in fact no specific request was made. Is that information that you perhaps have?
That's a similar question to the question asked before. I'm happy to take that on notice.
Ms Newman, what's Council's current position on the protection of those two properties? What's the current position?
So Council resolved on the 2nd of July this year, and I'm happy to read the resolution out for Council because that's the clearest position of the Council, that it noted prior resolutions to support the retention of Willow Grove and St George's Terraces as part of the Powerhouse Museum design. Reaffirmed its support for the retention of Willow Grove and St George's Terrace and advised DPE, the Department of Planning, in writing accordingly, with the lodgement of our submission on terms consistent with our prior resolution of the 9th of December 2019, which similarly was to advocate for the retention of those sites. Receive and note the draft minutes of the Heritage Advisory Committee Extraordinary Meeting on the 18th of June, and advise the Department of Planning accordingly at the time of lodgement of our submission, and we have completed that in that we've advised the Department at the time of the submission lodgement.
So in terms of the current proposed museum building, museum and residential building at Parramatta, Council doesn't support the current footprint of that building, which will require the demolition of those two heritage properties. That's the position, is it?
Yes, essentially.
Could I ask Ms Concato just for a little bit more, perhaps on that topic and more broadly? I understand that the Council's submission to the EIS provides some feedback, I think Mr Newman called it, and opportunities for improvement in relation to the current proposal for Powerhouse Parramatta. Is it fair to say that the current proposal isn't particularly good from the point of view of the Parramatta City Council, and in particular lacks due regard for a number of the council's sort of quite significant local plans, river strategy, civic link, that sort of thing?
I would say that there are opportunities for the design to be improved, particularly in relation to concerns raised around heritage, the impact on heritage items, the impact on civic link, and not quite realising the full aspirations of the council, concerns around flooding, the undercroft, and also some sustainability issues.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the recommendation now in relation to the submission: lack of consideration of heritage, lack of integration of the scheme in the public domain, lack of adequate consideration of and design for flood impacts, failure to meet the objectives of the pedestrian spine, inappropriateness of the design of the undercroft, and other matters, including the name of the museum. So there seems to be quite a number there of issues raised by the council in relation to the current proposal. I guess I'm suggesting that your description of that as opportunities for improvement or providing feedback is a little bit of an understatement in relation to what the council has actually said about the current proposal from government.
Slightly, I would say. I understand that you're referring to the submission that was attached to the council papers.
Which was endorsed by council.
Which was endorsed by council, yes. Since then, there has been a slightly amended version. And yes, but the matters are very much the same. The concerns still stand around heritage, civic link, flooding, and those other matters that we both have stated.
Lord Mayor, thank you for your attendance today. We heard this morning that the state government is developing a master plan for the Ultimo site, the Ultimo Powerhouse site, which will include the future of the Harwood building, the main museum building, and how it links with the rest of that kind of cultural ribbon that we have through the city there. Have you been approached at all? Has the council been approached at all by the state government to have input into that master plan?
There have informal conversations have occurred, and we have made it known that we're we do applaud the decision to retain the Powerhouse Museum in Ultimo, and we are very willing to be involved in any future discussions and planning for that site.
Well, I mean, it seems plain and obvious that the city should be a partner in any master planning for that site. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, we would want to have input, and as I said, informal discussions have occurred, and I'm hopeful that will be the case.
All right. So can we consider this an open offer from the council?
Oh, absolutely.
To sit
be
down
involved,
and
yes.
Because if you're looking at placemaking in the city,
Yes.
I would have thought
it's essential, and it's the whole precinct. It's the goods line. It's the rest of that creative and innovative precinct that, and Monica, our CEO, can perhaps speak on this too because she's involved in meetings about that precinct already. So would you like to add?
No, certainly. I chair the Alliance group.
Closer to the mic if you could.
Pull the mic a bit closer.
There is an informal group that refers to itself as an alliance of the key parties in that area, the two universities, the TAFE, the hospital, and now we hope the Powerhouse will join that group, and that group is and Greater Sydney Commission and people from Treasury also attend those meetings. And the purpose of those meetings is to talk about the future of that whole collaboration area and innovation area and innovation sort of district. And of course, we're delighted that the Powerhouse is going to remain because given the significant economic kind of drivers in that area, a museum of applied art and science fits perfectly in there. So we're thrilled with the decision, and we look forward to working even more closely now with the state government around integrating that particular museum. I mean, keeping any museum and cultural facility is important, but that one happens to actually represent the very things and collect on the very things that occur across that precinct. And it's the sort of precinct really that, is the envy of the world, and we're working together to see if we can't take it to its next place.
How often does this shadowy alliance meet, Ms. Barone?
It's not really a shadowy alliance.
I assure you there's minutes, but it isn't
No,
what I'm saying, it's not a formal, it's a group of members who meet to talk and collaborate and work together. We're meeting this afternoon, in fact. We meet sort of every 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I should say Inner West Council is also involved.
This is to have an input into decisions that are made about this important precinct in the future.
Oh, no, Lord Mayor, Ms. Barone, I was only being flippant. I think it's very sensible you meet together.
But,
you meet together.
He tries it every now and again.
Trevor's got issues over there. He'll deal with them. So is there an invitation out to both the state government and the Powerhouse to come and be part of that alliance to actually help build that?
Well, the state government sits on, attends the meetings. So, of course, we've got people attending from Treasury because of the tech precinct, which is at one end. We have representatives from the hospital. Of course, there's the $750 million investment going into the RPA hospital now, which is also going to be really significant in terms of that area. And there are Greater Sydney Commission comes along to the meetings, and we have invited the director of the Powerhouse to join us as well.
And the state government spent quite a bit of money developing this concept of a cultural ribbon running through the city, which included, at one point, running through the Powerhouse and down the strip and connecting all the way to the cultural institutions on the harbour side. Is that still part of the plan, a cultural ribbon?
If I could be bold as to say that actually that cultural ribbon was part of the City of Sydney's Sustainable Sydney 2030 plan.
Yep.
We're delighted that the government has embraced it, and but definitely the idea. I mean, when you're looking at sort of city planning, of course, you're looking for the connectivity of because things, what we know about economic planning and sort of economic multipliers is that when things are grouped together, they tend to do better. That's why if you have a strip of shops that sell furniture, they do better than a whole bunch of shops in different places because you go to the furniture district and you buy furniture. So similarly, the agglomeration of types of services and facilities improve all of them. That's why in other cities you have collections of theatres together, So you go to the theatre district. So because Sydney has its City of Sydney area has its cultural facilities a little spread out, the idea of the cultural ribbon was to find ways to connect them physically and sort of metaphorically. You know, how do we find the things that connect them to tell the story of that suite of facilities so that it becomes more legible to a visitor or to the community? So yes, it's definitely on the drawing board.
Lord Mayor, do you have a view on the conservation values and the necessity to conserve the existing buildings on the Ultimo site? And I'm not just talking about the main building, I'm talking about the other buildings, the storage buildings?
We have a great deal of interest in being involved in any decisions that are made about those sites. Certainly the historic powerhouse is vitally important. And I know there have been discussions about uses in those other buildings, but yes, I think they're all important, and we would like to be involved in that discussion.
When you say it's vital to protect the sort of main site, do you include in that the Sulman award-winning additions from the late 80s?
That is my personal view, yes. The Lionel Glendenning building that was purpose-built to celebrate the powerhouse. And I think the linkages from 19th and 20th century through to the 21st century are really vital. And this group that Monica is meeting with is really about the future of the precinct, its innovative and economic importance to Sydney. And of course, to link that up, you know, with the powerhouse, which is really quite symbolic of the past, and have the two together, I think is really important. It's important for us in terms of our identity, but it's really important too in terms of tourism and interest. And I think, as Monica said, it's the envy of the world, really, having such a precinct with, you know, universities and tech and the history, and then the goods line access to the city and linking that with Darling Harbour. It is really quite exciting. I felt so depressed every time I walked down the goods line and thought we were going to be losing this, because really the goods line was about walking up to and being welcomed at the powerhouse. It was so vital that linkages could occur, and it will be so important to us in the future in terms of tourism, as well as the development of this really important economic innovative hub, which is about our future.
Do you think there's a role on that site for further high-rise accommodation?
I don't personally know.
Join the club.
But, you know, I haven't been involved in discussions.
Could I just say something about that?
Yes, Monica.
Look, obviously the work, you know, all of us are looking very closely at that precinct, including, you know, government in terms of its economic return. It's really constrained in terms of the amount of floor space that's left to expand things like the biomedical, green tech and other things that are really emerging in that precinct. So it would be, I think many of us would think it would be not a good idea to take away any remaining development opportunities from the economic role that land can play. So, you know, once it's residential, it's sterilised. It can't, you know, it can't be really easily be brought back into the fold. So I would suggest, and again, this is as I said, this is, you know, these are not formally adopted positions of council, or this is not a formally constituted group. It's just a group of people getting together to talk about and think about the future of the area in order to then advise our councils and bodies. But given the constraint in terms of the amount of developable floor space in the area, we would hate to see it become residential when it could contribute to the economic opportunities there.
What I did say before too was that we don't have fixed ideas about the renewal on the site, but we have a lot of residential in that area, as you would know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
there's a lot there already.
it might give a narrow short-term financial return to the state government, but would come at significant cost to the long-term vitality of that district.
When you think about the really exciting opportunities for this, for the future in terms of the economic potential of this area.
It's the economic return.
And the economic return, yes. So we're just very keen. We're very excited about what's happened, and we're very keen to be involved, and we have done a lot of work, and we want to contribute that, and we hope that it can be very exciting for the future of the city's economy. I mean, our CBD does contribute 24% of the state's economy, 7% of the national economy, and this precinct is going to be a very important part of that economic future.
Just one final thing. I recall reading in your submission that at the time the submission was drafted, that there'd been about 100,000 square metres of cultural space lost in the city.
Yes, that's right.
Could you give us some indication of, where and how and why?
Well, I think that's the loss of industrial buildings with potential to be cultural spaces.
So
because
the City of Sydney does a comprehensive floor space census every 5 years, we do have very good data about the usage, what floor space is used for, and the number of jobs that it all generates. And so we have different categories, of course, financial, retail, tourism, and creative. And we have a certain definition of creative services. They include, things like architecture, artists, filmmakers, and people in that sort of innovation creative sector. So because many of those find it very difficult to pay high rents, as we have less and less of those cheaper buildings, then we start to lose them. And of course, we're very concerned about losing them because in terms of the sort of creative industries ecosystem and the innovation kind of spectrum, if you want, cities that have great innovation have people all along that spectrum, from artists to creative producers, universities, and then, people who then innovate and create the, products of the future. So, in order to maintain the innovation part of your economy, you need to have these other people in the spectrum. And if you lose them because they can't afford to be there, then you lose the health of that ecosystem.
So it's not just sites that are currently or previously used for creative spaces. It's that whole environment where the creative industries can operate. That's where the loss has been.
And where creatives want to be in clusters too.
It's the real floor space, though, that they used to occupy. So when we went out 5 years later, there were less of them, and those floor spaces were being used for other things or had been converted to residential. That's what happened.
I just had perhaps one last question for the City of Parramatta. Since the announcement on the 4th of July that the government would be keeping the Powerhouse Ultimo site and that all of the large flagship exhibits currently on display there that were to be moved to Parramatta are not going to be moved.
And not all the three. Yeah, three.
Three of the most significant on display at Ultimo would not be moving to Parramatta, and none of the permanent exhibitions at Ultimo would be moving. Has the City of Parramatta had any conversations with the state government expressing any concerns about what will be exhibited in the Parramatta site and ensuring that it is in fact prioritised as the flagship museum?
I'm not sure about specific conversations with specific members of the state government, but I can confirm that following that announcement, we advocate, and I think we issued a press release advocating and requesting that the state government confirm that the Powerhouse Museum in Parramatta would continue to be a full museum offering a full suite of exhibitions, and that would not change, so that essentially the government's commitment to the product being offered and all of the exhibition offerings in that site would not change. And I understand from memory that there was an announcement, I think, by the Treasurer a day or so following that, essentially confirming that commitment. I am not aware of any further detailed conversations or material provided by the state government as yet as to what the details of that product mix would be.
Is the city architect from Parramatta involved in the Parramatta Powerhouse project?
Yes, she is. She is a member of the Design Integrity Panel at the moment.
All right, we'll close at that juncture. Thanks very much for coming. I note that I think you, Mr. Newman, took something on notice. Is that right? So in these circumstances, witnesses are advised that they can take questions on notice, and which you have done, and that you have 21 days the Secretariat will be in contact with you in relation to those questions in terms of a response. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.